Are you ready to build the spiritual house of your dreams and reveal the true goal of your soul? This is Home Improvement for the Soul.
Hello, and welcome to Home Improvement for the Soul. So today we're changing it up a little bit. Instead of my interviewing somebody, I actually have my husband with me, Bob Vetter, who's going to interview me about my upcoming book, The Mandala Meditations, which is launching on Kindle this week coming up. It'll be launching Friday the 8th, International Women's Day. And then the hard copy will launch on March 12th. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to have somebody ask me some questions about it rather than me try to explain it all to you. And hopefully that way some of the questions you may have will also come out of this interview and we can share that together. So, Bob Vetter, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. And let me say, congratulations. I've been watching this project unfold for years and years. So it's so nice to see it finally coming to fruition and your book being in your hands. So good work.
And you know, a lot of the reason is because I had so much support from you every step of the way. When I would get upset about the project, when I would feel like this is not going how I want it to go, when things would be in my head like, why am I doing this? You were always there to keep me on track and to lift me up and to remind me of how important the project really is.
Somebody's got to push you. It might as well be me.
Yes. You and the creator. Just a little.
So let's start with the story about how all of this began. And I'm thinking that maybe I'll start the story.
Yeah.
And then I'll direct the questions to you after that.
Great. Perfect.
So the story begins with the death of our Arapaho mom. And we got news that she had passed away in Oklahoma. And that very night, I was laying next to Maddie, and she started talking in her sleep. So I kind of perked up and paid attention. It wasn't the first time that she had spoken in her sleep. She had actually done that a lot, but there was something very, very different that night. Because she started speaking in apparently spontaneously rhyming sentences. And all I can say is it went on and on and on. And I thought to myself, maybe when Maddie was a kid, she memorized something and was just speaking it back. That's honestly what I thought it was. So in the morning, I asked her, what was that last night that you were saying? And she was like, well, what are you talking about? And I explained what I had heard, and her answer was, I wasn't aware of anything. And so it opened up. I mean, in my opinion, somehow this opened up a portal to some part of herself or some part of her connection with something much, much deeper, a source of wisdom that is beyond what we normally tap into. And I say that largely because in watching her, actually, you know what? I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. I'm going to save that observation because now I'm going to turn it over to you to explain how it went from that night of you just speaking it out loud. How did it become something that was physically written down? So let's talk about that part of it.
Well, not much longer after that. At that time, I was in therapy to deal with a severe childhood trauma that I had just recently remembered. And so that I had a sort of anxiety disorder all my life really, from being probably in elementary school where I would have panic attacks periodically, or I would get very, very anxious over things. And so I went into therapy to deal with that. And I had a wonderful therapist who does many different forms and has studied many different things. And she's definitely a student of Carl Jung. And she had suggested that in order to deal with my anxiety, I should try meditating. But meditating, sitting, watching a flame, that doesn't work so well for me. I'm not good at that. That whole thought process of let the thoughts go, just seems to make more thoughts come. So she suggested that I try mandala meditation so that I could really focus. And that involves drawing something in a circle. It's a circular pattern where you start in the center and you go out and build a drawing so that gets you to focus. And it's an ancient technique, started as near as anybody can tell in India, or what we now call India, and it's been used all over the world. The Navajo have a way of doing it. There are many different cultures that do this type of meditation. And from the very first mandala I drew, I heard 2 lines of poetry. And if the mandala wasn't complete, like it wasn't on that first one, I just knew I should write those down. I finished the drawing, and then I just started to write. I picked up my pen, put it where those 2 lines were, went for the 3rd line, and from the 3rd, it just wrote. It was like, I've often described it, it's like taking dictation. It's like divine downloading. It's not something I think about. There's not a thought process that happens. It just is more like hearing it and writing it, and there's no editing at all. So it's not that I change things. It's been interesting over the years when I used to type them. Now, because of my arthritis, I speak them more than I type them. But when I used to type them, periodically a word would change. And again, no thought process. And I'd go, okay, well, we're just going to leave that there. Sometimes I would write so fast I couldn't understand it, and I would just stare at it, and then I would know what it was, or as I was attempting to type it, it would come out. Either way, it's not a thought process. I'm not thinking about what I'm writing, and I'm not editing in any way. It's just delivered through me to the page.
So my observation on it is that the rest of it is something that I could make sense of. But honestly, what I couldn't make sense of is how you could spontaneously write something that absolutely rhymes every single line. And, if it were me, I would be like, I would write one line and I would say, okay, what rhymes with banana? And the thought that you could write pages and pages with everything rhyming and the exact right cadence seems physically impossible to me. I can't even make sense of it other than to say that it's a mystery.
Yes.
It's a mystery to me how it happens. And, I'm in a better position to describe that than anybody because I'm the one who sees you do it.
Right.
And as you said, you write as fast as you can physically write, which is proof that it's bypassing the thinking process.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what happens. And even today, it's interesting, even with the arthritis, it comes, I don't think I'm writing quite as fast as I used to because my right hand's affected. So it comes through at a pace and a rhythm that I can continue to write. But it's still that automatic writing style. It's not a thought about process.
Now, let's go back to that first time.
Okay.
Now, when you did it overnight, you weren't aware of it.
No.
I was, you weren't, but there was no writing of it.
No.
And there was not only no thinking, but not even a reflection of it, not even a memory of it. So let's go to the first time that you had the instructions to do it as a mandala. You did the drawing.
Right.
What was the sensation? Like, what did it feel like to you when you went from that moment of the doodling or drawing in the center,
right,
to writing down the first 2 lines and then that link up from there to where it was going to go?
I don't know that there's, that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever even thought about it before, but I don't know that there's an actual physical sensation to doing this other than I'm very aware of my hand moving. I'm very aware of hearing something, hearing it, and it going through my hand. That, like, I feel that energetic sort of connection. But that's all I feel. I'm very, very much like in the moment, in that process, and in that action of writing.
Well, that's where I wanted to pick up. The way that you began the podcast was by talking about anxiety, dealing with anxiety,
right.
leading to this idea that you should in quotation marks, should do meditation, to not feeling like you made progress in meditation because you didn't like sitting there just doing nothing, to the mandala meditation where all of a sudden you are as passive in one sense as anybody is during meditation, but it's as though your mind is disengaged from the normal way of thinking while you're just catching up with what is being dictated to you.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
So do you hear it as a voice?
I do, sort of. I mean, I don't, you know me, I really hesitate to call this channeling because I don't feel like it's some outside entity, specific entity. I do hear it as a voice. I do hear it as coming from not me. You know, the voice that I hear is sort of mine. I mean, it's definitely feminine. I can say that it seems to be maybe not even feminine or masculine, but it doesn't seem to be disembodied from me. It doesn't seem to be like, it's not like a different voice, like you'll see her channelers and they're talking in a different, no, it's not like that at all. It's similar to my own voice, but it's just not coming from my brain. That's it.
Well, I'm less interested at the moment about what it is. I'm less interested in that than how you experience it.
I experience it exactly, I think, as if somebody is telling me a story. Okay, so let's say that. So if I'm listening to someone telling me a story, I am totally focused on that story, on the storyteller. I'm just with them 100% in the now, because being a storyteller myself, that's the way I experience people telling me stories. Whether it's an ancient story or it's somebody's personal story, that's how I experience it. I'm totally focused on that. So my experience of the poetry is that I'm listening to this voice, this story in rhyme being told. The only difference is where I'm not writing down somebody else's story. I am writing this. So I feel what I feel physically, like I said earlier, is my hand and arm writing, and, you know, all I see, though, is the page. I don't see things outside of me. I am just totally focused on the page and the writing and keeping it going.
Well, let's go back to the analogy that you made between the way this happens and the way you experience storytelling.
Right.
So there's two ends of the storytelling process. There's when you hear a story the first time and when you tell a story.
Right.
So how does this fit in with those two sides of storytelling?
Well, when you hear a story, or at least for me, and I think probably for all storytellers, as you well know, because you're a storyteller also, when you hear a story that touches your heart, it's not, there's not a process of memorization. Like if I hear someone tell a story that really moves me, I can hear my body absorb it. I can hear my brain, feel my brain absorbing the story, so that I don't, unless it's really, really long, I don't have to really memorize it. I can take it from there, and if I feel like I got to make notes so that I remember certain aspects of the story, so I remember the order, I might do that. But really, if I hear a story that touches my soul, phew, I got it. And that's pretty close to the experience of hearing the poetry.
Another thing that I wanted to point out that I find kind of interesting has to do with the way that you reflect on the stories with me. Mm-hmm. After you've done a particular poem and mandala, when you describe it, you're describing it like somebody else reflecting on that poem.
Yes.
And so in other words, when you and I talk about it, you talk about it as if, oh, somebody else wrote this really cool poem. Not it, and there's not even a second of,
no.
Yeah, I wrote a great poem, didn't I?
Yeah.
It's not that at all. It's hey, this was a really interesting one, or this one surprised me because it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
So the non-ownership of it, I guess, is what I'm commenting on now. All right, now I want to go into a different part of this, which is to talk about the reader or the listener. Mm-hmm. Because the messages that are here, and it's kind of related to my last comment, the messages that are here are not messages just for you.
No, not anymore.
In the beginning, I thought that's what it was, that this was information that you needed about your life, but somewhere along the way, things shifted. And let's have you talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think in the very, very beginning, the poem that I was writing had a great deal to do with speaking to me personally about how to go through this healing process. And as you know, when I write the poem and then I go back and read it, I'm always surprised. I'm always like shocked. I'm like, I wrote that like I have no memory of what I wrote until I reread it. And then I realized this is amazing stuff. So in the beginning, a lot of it seemed very pertinent to becoming calm or becoming, at peace with things. And it seemed to me like it spoke more to me. And even the mandalas seemed different. They were very solid. Like if you look at some of the original ones. And then they started to change. They became sort of more open, a lot of nature sort of themes and vines and flowers and hearts and things like that. And as that happened, I got an awareness that this poetry could be for anybody's healing. It seemed to not just for anybody's healing, but actually seemed to be divine messages for the world's healing, not just even specific people. So where I first interpreted the poetry to be specifically directed towards my healing, I realized as it kept going and going and going that it had changed into something different. And even I know in the book I included a couple of poems from that first year, which I think was 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. And when I looked at that poetry, I thought, really all along it has had that element of healing and messages for anybody and everybody that can hear it. Not everybody can hear every type of delivery on every type of message.
So we're really talking about three different receiving audiences.
Right.
One was for you at a time that you needed your own personal growth and change.
Right.
So it came in a form of medicine for you.
Right.
Over time, it shifted to messages that were not applicable only to you, but that were applicable to the wider world.
Absolutely.
And then I remember at some point we talked about how this could be done for a specific person.
Yep.
And you did that a number of times. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it several times. I did it first for myself because I kept thinking in the beginning, why me? Why am I the one getting this? So even in the book, it opens with that poem answer that I got to that question I asked of the universe, why me? And then I've asked several other questions of the universe since then, or the creator, whoever, this divine source for this poetry, and I always would get an answer. And then then maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was sitting with our friends, our two friends, John and Christina, and I kept looking at Christina, and I kept getting 2 lines of poetry. I just kept hearing it over and over again as she was talking, and I finally said to her, I need a piece of paper and a pen. I wrote those 2 lines. I wrote out this poem, and I said, this is for you, handed it to her. And as you know, she was practically in tears. It answered for her a question she had been dealing with for quite a while as far as her specific journey. So it answered it so much that she actually framed it, typed it out, framed it, and has it up in her treatment room. So I then started to realize that this was for other people. We then had friends visiting us. I had, Paul had a question for me. I answered his question. Then his daughter, Diana had a question, and I answered that question. And then what I also discovered was that sometimes I would ask people. There was one woman that we were talking back and forth. She had a question. I wasn't getting anything. And I said, I had brought my pens with me, so I had the colored pens with me. And I said, well, what are your favorite colors? What are your 4 favorite colors, or 5? And she told me what they were. She picked out the pens, and I started to draw with those colors. And I ended up drawing a very small mandala, maybe like, some of them are big full-page ones, but maybe like that big, little, like an inch, maybe a couple of inches. And then as soon as I completed that, what became the last circle of that mandala, I heard the 2 lines, and I wrote out her poem. I handed it to her, and she, again, had the same reaction. Oh, my God, that really answers the question. And the thing is about answering someone's question, even my own question, whether it's about the pandemic, whether there's a poem in there, Pandemic, which was an answer to what is going on with the pandemic. And, whatever question it's answering, there is the same thing. I'm not thinking about the question. I'm not thinking about answering the question. I'm just listening and receiving and writing out the answer that I receive.
So of those 3 that we talked about a moment ago,
right,
which are some of the messages are for you, some
right,
of them are universal messages for the world,
right,
some of them are for individual people.
Yep.
So your book is about to be launched, and people will see this in print.
Right.
Your book focuses mostly on the messages that are for the world,
right,
that are for everyone. So I want to spend a couple of moments talking about what people can expect when they read it and why these messages are important to the reader.
Well, I'm going to take this based on having had close friends, people in the women's circle that we have here on Long Island, people that I know pretty well and have had read the work. So the most interesting thing was when I first started to put the book together, and I picked a poem, and I took it. There were 5 women from the circle that volunteered to read the poem. They each read it, and then I asked them, I said, so just let me know if there's any section of the poem that seems particularly meaningful to you. Pull it out, let me know what it is. I just want to know how the poem is affecting you. And what I found was, what we all found that was so interesting, is every single person picked a different set of lines. Nobody picked the same, 5 or 6 lines. That, well, it wouldn't be 5. It would always be between 4 and 6 because they are couplet rhymes. So nobody picked the same ones. And then we sat. The great thing to do in a circle is to look at those. And then we did this on Zoom. We sat and discussed, like, what are you getting out of that? What does that mean to you? Why are those the 6 lines you picked? So I think it's applicable. You can use it in a group. And you can do the same thing we did, where we pulled out different lines to see what they meant. And then that's a really beautiful way, I think, to use the book to connect with each other in the same way people use tarot cards or oracle cards. You know, we do that in Circle also. So I think there's that. I think for you as an individual reading the book, you certainly can do what's come to be known as passage meditation, where you could take anything, any poem, any great spiritual writing, and you look at it, you find that your heart is touched by 2 or 3 or 4 lines, and that becomes your mantra. So that becomes what you say over and over to yourself, because it calms you, it reveals something to you. And as we know that this type of poetry is best equated to the type of spiritual poetry that then gets turned into songs. It gets turned into chants. It gets turned into lines of meditation. It gets turned into a way for the individual to spiritually connect with their creator, their source, the universe, whatever that spiritual being is in their lives, God, however they look at it. But that's the thing, is that the poetry becomes personal to each person that reads it.
So, yeah, I like that idea that as a reader, I'm not passively reading this.
No.
I'm using it actively.
Right.
And it touches on the themes that are important to me, which is why, as you said, 5 people could read the same poem and each one receive a different message, not just a different emphasis, but something completely different, the way that it links up to them in their life, in their challenges, and in the things that they exceed in.
Right.
And it's also interesting to say that the words allow for a spiritual connection to take place.
Yes.
Which to me is what also makes it, you mentioned that it's like tarot or an oracle, which I completely agree with. You know, that if you read, like, for example, let's say you read the I Ching.
Right.
You look at the passages and you say, well, what is it in that passage that's going to offer somebody help and meaning?
Mm-hmm.
And it lies in the fact that it evokes imagery, but it doesn't hit you over the head with a message.
Right.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about the work.
Yes. And that's why I think that what's so beautiful and powerful about the poetry is that there's no expectations. Whatever this divine source is does not seem to have an expectation that you will or will not like it. It always feels to me like it just has to be out there. Mm-hmm. And then, like with any work of any spiritual work, any artwork, it's there for the people that receive it and understand it. And it's not there for the people that don't. And there will, but all spiritual work, and I believe all art is actually spiritual work, all spiritual work, all art is put out there through what I believe to be the collective soul, the big soul. You know, each of us is a part of that. Each of us is part of that great soul of humanity. And we each have, when we're really in touch with the soul, then we really do end up putting out creatively whatever that work is. And then each of us becomes a piece of the whole, becomes the identity of the creator.
So what it reminds me of, which I think I've mentioned to you before, is an article that was written by Tagore called The Religion of an Artist. And in this essay, which I certainly encourage everybody listening to try to find it. It's kind of obscure. I forget what book I saw it in. It's many years, I'm sure, out of print. But if you can find it, it's really an inspiring piece. Because what he talks about is how the work that we do, the creative work of an artist, is to do the work of our creator.
Right.
You know, our Creator gave us this built-in capability of being creative.
Yes.
And every time we create a piece of artwork, it has form, but it also has some of us and something that transcends us
Yep.
in it. And clearly that's what goes on with your poetry. And the other thing that I was thinking for the listener is pick something at random, pick one that you like, let the feeling of it wash over you, and then journal about it. Because
Yes.
what happens then is your own creativity is added to that creativity of what originally went into the creation of the poem.
Yes, yes. And we just get more and more connected through that process. And that's the point. The whole point of all this spiritual artistry that's been coming down to us for thousands of years is to reconnect us to each other, to the love that formed this world, and to the Creator itself.
And as such, we're going to pick a passage to close with today.
Oh, wonderful.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about how this particular one, which is one of my favorite pieces, I'll read it, but you can give everybody the setup for it.
So Bob and I spent a weekend with our dear friend and teacher, Oscar Miro Quesada, and he is a Peruvian curandero shaman, for those of you that don't quite understand what a curandero is or may not know. But during these weekends, it's so wonderful because we become the mandala, we become the altar. So the way we sit in the room, the things we talk about, the songs we sing. And towards the end of the weekend, what happens is we make an offering, and the offering is made with flowers and plants, things that people have gathered from nature. We all go out, we all gather the things that are on the land around us. And then there were about 6 of the women that were assigned to put this together in the despacho, which is the offering. And when they make the offering, it's made in the shape of a mandala. It's round, it's on a piece of paper that can be either burned or floated down a river, however the offerings decided to be made. And then there's this beautiful, beautiful picture that gets formed of all this beautiful, beautiful plant life, and then that gets folded up, and that becomes the offering, and there's prayers going on while they're doing it. So as I'm watching them do this, I hear 2 lines of poetry. And I just picked up my notebook. So I didn't draw the mandala in this case. They were creating it. And this is what came out. This is what happened.
So let me read this, one of my own personal favorites. Hopefully everyone else will enjoy it the way that I do. The offering. Offer your heart and offer your soul. Offer the love that keeps us all whole. Offer the good and offer the bad. Offer the happy and offer the sad. Offer what's precious and gifted and rare. Offer what cannot be offered or spared. Give till you have nothing more left to give. Give so that others can find how to live. Give to the west and give to the east. Give to the babies, the birds, and the beasts. Give until all that is left is your love, and all of this light can connect from above. And as you keep giving, keep one thing in mind, that all of this giving is one way to find the truth of our hearts, the truth of our souls, the song in the light that keeps us all whole. There never is nothing that you cannot give, for love and compassion is what lets you live. So if giving is not something you've ever known, then start down its path, and you will be shown the way to the light, the way of above. This way is the star road, and all built of love.
That is a beautiful poem. That is one of my favorites also, and I just want to share that I do think you should try reading them aloud, that if you purchase the book, that you should flip open or go through the table of contents, see if a particular title hits you, and then read it aloud first.
I
Because I
agree.
do think listening to it is the right way to start.
Well, it engages a different part of your brain.
Right.
So your experience of it is completely different when you hear it than when you read it.
Exactly. So I'm just going to say that I hope you all go to my website, Maddie. I just forgot my website. Hold it. I got it. Here it is. It's MaddieCheers.com. Maddie is spelled MaddieCheers, MaddieCheers.com. And if you go there, you can sign up and you'll get a notice as soon as the book is launched. And then in the back of the book, there will be a QR code so that you can go get a free little coloring book put together by the artist that did all the artwork, the additional artwork, not my original artwork, but took my original artwork and digitized it, Amalia Drews, and you'll get to get your own free little coloring book and hope that starts you on your path to doing your own meditative artwork. So please enjoy. Thank you so much for listening. Bob, why don't you also tell us your website?
My website is, oddly enough, bobvetter.com.
Yes, it is.
Who would have thought?
Who'd have thought that? So, and also, if you're not big on websites, you can find me on Facebook at the Women's Oneness Project. It's a public group. Feel free to join. You'll have to answer a couple of questions, and that's about it. Then you can join us on the weekends for poetry and prayers on Sundays, and when a lot of different poets contribute, not just me. So thanks again. I hope you have a beautiful, wonderful time until we meet again. Thank you.
And congratulations, Maddie.
Oh, thanks, honey. See you soon.
Thank you for joining us for Home Improvement for the Soul. If you'd like more information, please go to womensoneness.com or maddiecheers.com. That's womensoneness.com or maddiecheers.com. See you on the next episode.